Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ella. Welcome. Today I'm going to be starting like a new vibe for my channel. So if you like that stuff, press the subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell because that way you won't miss any new videos and you will always see when I post about something new. So I'm not going to talk too much in the beginning because like there's not really much to say. If you're here for the title of this video, which is the Madeleine McCann case. The Madeleine McCann case is a very well-known missing persons case. This was a very publicized thing when it happened, and her parents have really tried hard to make it still something that people are talking about. Let's just get started. Madeleine McCann was born on May 12th, 2003 in, I'm not sure how to say the name, Leicester, England, and she lived with her family here from the time she was a child until she was 3 years old. Madeleine was described as a little girl with blonde hair, bluish green eyes. There was a brown spot on the iris of her right eye, and she had a small brown birthmark on the calf of her left leg. Madeleine's parents were Kate and Jerry McCann. They met in 1993 and they ended up getting married in 1999. They had Madeleine in 2003 and then they had their two later children in 2005. So when Madeleine was 3 years old, she left the UK with her family for vacation. The people on this vacation were Madeleine's parents, her twin siblings, and friends of her parents with their kids. This group left the UK and headed to Praia de Luz, Portugal. The group that the McCanns were traveling with included 9 adults and 7 children in total, so there's a pretty decent amount of people along on this trip. So the people in this group were Fiona and David Payne. Along with them were Fiona's mother, Diana Webster. The two other couples traveling with them, Jane Tanner and Russell O'Brien with their 2 kids, as well as Matthew and Rachel Oldfield with their daughter. The McCanns arrived on April 28th, 2007 in Praia de Luz for a week-long vacation. They were placed in apartment 5A. The apartment was on the ground floor and there were 2 bedrooms. This specific apartment was near the edge of the resort. The unique thing about apartment 5A where the McCanns were was that it was accessible from 2 streets because it was on the corner. There were sliding doors in the living room that overlooked the pool and tennis courts of the resort. There were a few steps and then a gate, and then you would be at the sliding doors. The front door was on the opposite side of the apartment and it faced the other street. The McCann kids slept in a bedroom near the front door. They kept the front door locked all the time. And there was one window in this room that the kids were staying in. The McCanns kept this window closed throughout the whole week they were there. Madeleine was sleeping on a bed across from the window in this room. The twins were on travel cots on the floor, which meant the other bed, which was under the window, was left empty. On Thursday, May 3rd at breakfast, Madeleine asked her parents why they didn't come get them last night when they were crying. When this happened, Kate and Jerry didn't really think anything of it. They just thought she had had a bad dream or heard something. So this same morning that Madeleine said this to her parents, Kate noticed a brown stain on Madeleine's pajama shirt. It could possibly be relating to whatever Madeleine was talking about or whatever happened in their room the night before she went missing. So they carried on with their day. They had a pretty normal day. They were by the pool and Kate took the last known picture of Madeleine McCann, and it's right here. It's her sitting at a pool with her sister and her dad. So that night the McCanns put their kids to bed at around 7 p.m. Madeleine went to sleep in pink and white pajamas. At 8:30, Kate and Jerry left apartment 5A to have dinner with the rest of the group, and this restaurant was about 180 feet away from apartment 5A. To actually walk there, you were walking about 300 feet just because of things you had to go around. It's not a direct path. So the patio doors in the McCann's apartment were not able to be unlocked from the outside, so they left them unlocked so they could go through them to check on their kids throughout the night. One thing that's very important is that the staff of the resort left a note in like a reservation book, basically reserving the table that this group was using at the restaurant every night. On that note, it said that the kids would be left in the apartment and they would be sleeping. Kate McCann actually thinks that someone saw that note and planned out the night and the time to go in and take Madeleine. They knew no adults would be there. So Madeleine's parents took turns around every half an hour checking on the kids. Jerry McCann checked on his kids at 9:05 first. Everything seemed to be fine, except that he remembered leaving the door almost closed and it was wide open now. He didn't really think anything of it. The kids were still asleep, so he left the door slightly open and went back to dinner. Jane Tanner, one of the members of the group, left the restaurant around the same time as Jerry to go check on her own daughter. She passed Jerry while he was walking back to dinner and she was walking to her apartment. After Madeleine had disappeared, Jane told the police that at 9:15 she had seen a man carrying a child. He was near apartment 5A, but he was walking away from it. Two other men who were in this area at this time that night claimed that they didn't see anyone walking, which led the Portuguese police to believe that Jane Tanner actually made this up, and this became known as the Tanner sighting. And it's actually one of the most important components of this whole case. The man that Tanner claims to have seen was walking in the direction of a man named Robert Murat. He was a 33-year-old man who lived near apartment 5A, and he became the first suspect of Madeleine's case. The child that Robert Murat was seen carrying that night looked very similar to Madeleine, and Jane Tanner described that he did not look like a tourist. This was suspicious to her. They released a sketch of what Tanner described that night, but actually when investigated, Robert Murat was living in his mother's house that was only 150 yards away from apartment 5A. This house was in the direction that he was seen walking that night. He also did have a daughter Madeleine's age, and that is who he was carrying that night. He actually became a suspect though because it was reported by a few people that he was asking frequently about Madeleine's case. 3 of the McCann's friends and other staff at the resort said they did see Robert Murat near the apartment at the time Madeleine vanished. However, this wasn't super strange because he lived so close. He and his mother claimed that they were home all evening, and he was eventually dropped as a suspect. His mother, Jenny Murat, said that the night Madeleine was taken, she had driven past 5A and she saw a woman outside acting suspiciously. She also said she saw a brown car speeding towards 5A down the wrong side of the street, which is very weird. So it was declared that this sighting that was known as the Tanner sighting was completely unrelated to Madeleine's case, and it was just this guy walking home with his daughter at night. There was another report of a man carrying a child the night Madeleine disappeared. On May 26, 2007, Martin and Mary Smith reported that they saw a man carrying a child towards the beach. The Smiths said he didn't look like a tourist and he seemed to be uncomfortable carrying the child. So EFITs, which are like computer-made images based off of witnesses' descriptions, were released in 2013. This is who they saw. It's both of their descriptions, but it's supposed to be the same person. Kate McCann was planning to do a check at 9:30 to go check on her kids and make sure everything was okay, but their friend Matthew Oldfield said he would do it since he was checking on his own kids right next door to the McCanns. Oldfield claims to have entered the McCanns' apartment and saw that the kids' room was wide open, but he didn't look into the room any further. Unfortunately, he cannot say if Madeleine was there at that time or if the window was open at that time. This made Oldfield a suspect in Madeleine's case as well. I don't think this was really investigated much further. Proved him innocent, there wasn't much evidence, and it's not really believed that he is Madeleine's abductor. Around 10, Kate goes to check on her kids. She entered the room through the patio door, which they had left unlocked. Again, she saw the kids' door was wide open, just as it was the last time. When she went to shut it, it slammed shut as if the wind had taken it. She opened the door, obviously concerned, and the window was wide open. Curtains were blowing, and Madeleine was not there. Her blanket and her stuffed animal were there, but she was not. Kate looked around the apartment quickly just to make sure she wasn't still there, and she immediately ran back to the rest of the group and used the exact words, "Madeleine's gone, someone's taken her." She immediately jumped to the conclusion that she had been taken, which is something we will get to later. Something else I thought was a little strange about this is that her 2 other kids, the twins, were sleeping in this room and she didn't take them or just call for help. She ran away. Obviously, everyone panicked. At 10:10, Jerry sent Matthew Oldfield to the front desk to call the police, and at 10:30, the resort started their missing child protocol. Until 4:30 a.m., staff and guests searched the resort. Everyone at this point kind of just assumed she had wandered off. She'd only been gone a few hours. Like, kids don't just get taken out of their bed. People who were there that night said you could hear her name being called across the whole resort. At 11:10 that night, 2 officers arrived and briefly searched until midnight before they realized this was probably a little more serious and that she hadn't just wandered off. I believe it's like the Portugal FBI. Like, it's a higher level of, it's a higher police force. And they arrived at the resort at 1 a.m. Patrol dogs were brought to the resort at 2 a.m. Dogs signaled behind the couch in apartment 5A and in the wardrobes of the bedroom. The dogs didn't alert anywhere else, including the beach where the sighting of the man walking walking towards the beach with a child was. That whole sighting was pretty much useless at this point. There is a lot of judgment of how things were handled in the early hours of Madeleine's disappearance. Police did not do house-to-house searches. Border and Marine police were not given descriptions of Madeleine until hours after she disappeared. Roadblocks were not put into place until 10 a.m. the next morning, so there was almost 12 hours of time that if someone took Madeleine would be able to get out of the resort and get out of Portugal, basically. The company that manages surveillance footage of roads say they were never contacted by anyone for surveillance of roads around the resort or in the resort that night. It also took 5 days to issue a missing persons report. That could have been crucial. 5 days is a long time. She could have been across the world in 5 days. All of these people could have seen her and just thought nothing of it. So that's something that really was not working in the McCann's favor. Also, not everyone in the resort the night Madeleine went missing was interviewed, which I just thought was strange because like that just seems like common sense. Like they would interview all the people around to get as much information as possible. And the Portuguese police, not probably doing the best they could, really turned the McCanns against them. And like, I get it, because if I was in a foreign country and now you have to rely on their police system for everything, I would imagine it's not fun. There were 3 samples taken from Madeleine's room, and there was reported to be DNA from one unknown person. However, 20 people had entered apartment 5A since the time Madeleine went missing, so it really could have been anybody, and this was not useful anymore. Apartment 5A was closed off as a crime scene for a month, but it was opened back up for use of tourists in August of 2007. After this, it was closed again for more testing and investigation, which was just stupid because at that point, everyone who had been in there, now their DNA was in there, and it really just, the case was not handled how it should have been handled. Again, the McCanns were not really happy with this. They wanted to bring the British police into it because they thought they could do a better job. Madeleine's disappearance remained a Portuguese inquiry, but the British police from Madeleine's hometown started their own investigation. However, this probably wasn't the most efficient thing because the Portuguese police and the British police, they didn't really like each other. They butted heads a lot. They were working against each other, really. They weren't working together to find Madeleine. They were trying to have control of the case. Jerry McCann had said that he wanted to market Madeleine to keep her case alive and keep people talking about her. This initially made the Portuguese police suspicious against the McCanns because to them it was like they were just using her to get a lot of attention, and the police actually saw social media as a distraction and something that was slowing the case down, while the McCanns saw it as something that was helping it and getting awareness out. The McCanns set up Madeleine's fund, and basically they were trying to collect as much money as they could to keep her investigation going. They set up a website and it attracted millions of viewers within the first few days. Because of the McCanns really putting in that effort to keep this case alive and to keep attention on Madeleine, her case has become known as the most heavily reported on missing persons case in modern history. Another movement that was organized for Madeleine was leaving balloons in different cities. Newspapers with Madeleine's face on it sold thousands more copies than anything else, and her case really blew up across the world. Kate McCann even released a book called Madeleine, Our Daughter's Disappearance and the Continuing Search for Her. In June of 2007, the media turned against the McCanns. They were actually asked in an interview if they were involved in Madeleine's disappearance. The media really shifted focus from focusing on Madeleine and finding this girl to framing the parents. So the Tanner sighting is important here again because the men not involved with the McCanns, who didn't know them at all, said that they didn't see anyone. So this really led a lot of people to believe that the McCanns and their friends had covered up Madeleine's death by framing it as an abduction, and ultimately the Tanner sighting was just something that they had made up to bring attention off of them and give the investigators a main suspect. There were lots of articles, lots of accusations against the McCanns with really not a lot of evidence. Specifically, people started to say that the McCanns and their friends would drug their kids so that they could go out to dinner earlier, and the theory was that they had gave Madeleine too much sleeping medicine or whatever and she had overdosed accidentally, and they tried to frame it as an abduction and they really just disposed of her body. So the people thought that this group that was traveling with the McCanns had this like pact of silence and that they had all agreed not to talk about what had happened that night. There was some evidence actually to go along with this. The Portuguese police were already suspicious of the McCanns, so they started looking into this stuff, and there were a lot of inconsistencies between the McCann stories and their friends' stories. However, when the McCanns and their friends were interviewed the first time, it was in Portuguese, and it actually there was a translator who was translating the questions to English and then translating back multiple times. So everything that was said about everything in this case was translated 3 to 4 times. And this could be why there are a lot of inconsistencies. The inconsistencies, they still made the police believe that the McCanns could be involved, so they were investigated even more. Coming back to another fact I mentioned earlier, when Kate first found that Madeleine was gone, she immediately said, "Madeleine's gone, she's been taken," which lots of people found this suspicious because why is that the first thing you think? Why don't you just think she wandered off? Because that is what a lot of other people at the resort thought. A lot of people who believed in the theory that the McCanns had actually killed Madeleine thought that they were just trying to set up this path for framing it as an abduction and like putting that idea in people's minds right off the bat. Many Portuguese investigators actually still do believe today that Madeleine died in apartment 5A and the McCanns covered it up. On June 27th, 2007, the McCanns reached out to Daniel Krugel, who was a former police officer who claimed to have developed a tool that could be used to locate missing children. However, this seemed completely fake and not a reliable way to find evidence, but the McCanns were willing to do it. Kate McCann also wanted to use psychics to lead her to her daughter. The police actually took the McCanns believing in these crazy methods as a sign that they were involved or that they actually did it, because the random craziness brought up a new solution that everyone else believed that would have cleared the McCanns. Kate claimed that they knew this stuff was crazy, but she said they were desperate and they were willing to try anything. On August 6th, 2007, dogs were taken to a line of cars, including the McCanns and Robert Murat's. One dog signaled in front of the McCanns' driver's side door. The other dog signaled at the trunk. DNA was collected from these places where the dog signaled and sent to a lab. At this point, the Portuguese police were really only focusing on the McCanns being guilty. They were so convinced that it was them. Without waiting for DNA results, the police told the McCanns that Madeleine's case was now a murder case. The DNA from the car ended up being too complex to use in any useful way in the case. However, the McCanns were still given suspect status as of September 2007. So at this point for the McCanns, things got really bad. Kate was told by police that if she just confessed to killing her daughter now, she would probably serve less time and her husband would be free to go. However, they were told by their lawyer not to answer any questions, so the Portuguese police gave the judge a report of all of the evidence that the McCanns and their friends were guilty. They looked at the McCanns and their friends' phones, they looked at their call logs, they basically looked at everything. They were looking for any just like evidence that would prove that it was the McCanns. So at this point, the British police were really trying to prove that the McCanns were innocent, while the Portuguese was doing the opposite. And this slowed them down even more because it wasn't even really Madeleine's investigation anymore. It was about the parents. In July of 2008, the McCanns' suspect status was revoked for lack of evidence. The same happened for Robert Murat. Both were no longer suspects. There were a number of reports of people acting strangely around 5A in the days and hours leading up to Madeleine's disappearance. Many people had said they saw men acting suspiciously. The British police concluded that the men that were seen acting suspiciously were part of a group conducting planned abductions or planned burglaries. And they had said basically that they were hanging around the apartments trying to figure out information on people who lived there, like when they wouldn't be home. There was an increase in burglary in the area of this apartment before the McCanns went there. There were actually 2 burglaries in the same block as apartment 5A within 17 days of Madeleine's disappearance. In both of these burglaries, they had entered through the window, very similar to how they entered 5A if someone had abducted Madeleine. On April 25th, the tourists who rented apartment 5A before the McCanns had actually found a man on their back porch. And there was just overall a lot of weird behavior around this area. Another thing that was reported the night of Madeleine's disappearance, at 11 p.m. on that night, 2 men were seen near apartment 5A arguing with raised voices, but when they were noticed, they quieted their voices and walked away. And it seemed as if they didn't want to be noticed. Men who looked very similar to these 2 seen that night were seen acting suspiciously around 5A also days and hours before Madeleine's disappearance. So a lot of people thought they were involved. Moving on, in July of 2008, the lead investigator of the Portuguese police in Madeleine's case actually quit so he could write a book claiming that the McCann parents were guilty of killing Madeleine. His book was titled Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, and it was published and even turned into a Portuguese documentary. The McCanns were not happy, obviously, and they did sue. The judge said the book could no longer be sold. However, it was overturned as they said it was blocking the investigators' right to freedom of speech. The way it ended was that he was allowed to publish his book and the McCanns couldn't really do anything about it. There were a number of private investigations run by the McCanns. These were all funded by donations. However, there weren't really any big leads or suspects from here on out. And that's unfortunately kind of what happens with cases like this. As you get away from those really crucial hours of finding evidence and suspects and leads, the case kind of loses momentum and it kind of dies out. And this is really the way it's been since 2008. There hasn't really been any big leads or any new information that has come up on this topic. Really, to just summarize, the main theories of what happened to Madeleine were that it was a burglary gone wrong. Someone had came in there, just planned to take some things. Maybe she was awake and saw them, so they just took her. Another big theory is that it was her parents. This is actually believed by a lot of people, which for me, I don't see it. I just don't see that it would be her parents because they're still looking for her to this day. To me, it doesn't make sense. If you really were framing it, when the media is kind of letting it die out, wouldn't you kind of just go with it and not still be trying to keep it alive? I don't know, that's just what I think, but that is a big theory. Another big theory is that it was actually a planned abduction. Someone saw that note in the reservation book. To me, the one that makes the most sense is someone knew the kids would be alone that night and planned to take Madeleine, and they succeeded. I don't know, that's what I think. I really don't think it was the parents. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it seems like all the evidence that goes towards them is really stuff that can be debunked. Let me know in the comments what you actually think happened. There is a little bit of recent information on this case. In 2020, there was an investigation related to Madeleine in Germany. A 43-year-old man in Braunschweig, Germany was living in a camper near the resort at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. That camper was signed to a new owner the next day. The suspect has a previous criminal record, but there's not really any evidence that he was involved in the McCann case. Madeleine's parents received a lot of judgment ever since Madeleine was taken. People really judged their parenting choices and the fact that they were leaving their kids in a room alone with the door unlocked in a foreign country, you know, a pretty good distance away. They were young. Madeleine was 3 and the twins were younger than her, so I don't think that's something I would personally do. I don't know, every parent feels comfortable doing different things, and they obviously probably now regret that a lot. And they still receive a lot of hate and judgment on that, as well as being involved in the case. The Portuguese police still pretty much believe the McCanns did it. There is a Netflix documentary series that actually gives more details and explains the entire case. To conclude, Madeleine has never been found, and she's pretty much presumed to be dead. There are a few age progression photos out of Madeleine. This is one of Madeleine at age 9. This is actually pretty outdated. I did not see any new photos of what Madeleine would look like. She would be 17 today. Kate and Jerry McCann continue to look for Madeleine to this day. They make frequent trips to and from Portugal, living in the UK again, with their other 2 children. The twins pretty much live a normal life. They live very much under the radar. The parents keep them sheltered and protected, obviously, after what happened. They are 15 today, and as I said, Madeleine would be 17. The more time that passes from her disappearance, the less likely she is to be found alive. So if you have any information, please tell the proper authorities. I will link the McCann's website in the description if you're interested in donating to them. That was a long video. If you guys enjoy this type of video, please subscribe and please let me know in the comments, because this is what I'm going to be doing now. Also, if there's any other missing persons cases you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comments. I would love more ideas. I'd love to do what you guys want to see and not just cases I'm interested in. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can see every time I post a video, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!